to another edition of Viper Voices. Very pleased to be joined by, a very memorable Vernon Viper way back in 05-06, if I'm not mistaken. He made his Viper debut. Hunter Bishop joins us. Hunter, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
What's been great about this feature is we've been able to reach out to Viper alumni, guys who have had prolific careers and gone on to bigger and better things. And it's hard to find a guy that's had more of an impact, specifically in his 3 years in Vernon as you did. But we're going to go back to the beginning. I mean, that's what makes this fun. Alaska Fairbanks, that's where you're from. Walk us through what it's like growing up in a place where I understand it's sunny all the time, and then it isn't for just as long of a time. What was that? What was growing up in Fairbanks like for you?
Yeah, growing up in Alaska is definitely unique. It's funny now because I'm living as far away as possible, they say, but it just didn't pick it that way. It's just the way it ended up here in Charleston, South Carolina on the beach. But yeah, neither one of my parents are from Alaska. My dad's a California hippie a little bit. Then my mom's from the Midwest, and they picked Alaska for the jewelry business before I was around. So I grew up, born and raised right in Fairbanks, middle of the state. It's a fairly large city. It's still 70, 80,000. I don't know what it is today, but, people would say, well, did you have running water, electricity? I'm like, yeah, man, it was a regular city. So no, it was a good spot. There was, hockey was definitely and is still the sport in Alaska. When the ground's frozen 9 months out of the year and you can have outdoor rinks. And that's just what I remember from my childhood is just all the outdoor hockey. And that's one thing you don't get here with the warmer weather, but super grateful for that. Talking to my dad this week, he's going moose hunting and doing all the Alaska things. So I certainly miss that. But yeah, it was, I got started really young. My dad had me on the ice, I think when I was about 3 years old. He's missing his two front teeth from a high stick and a puck. So I think it was, I'm not sure I had much of a choice, but I definitely loved it early on. My dad coached me all the way up until I was about a peewee. And then I had multiple really great influences on my way out. And, I played at a AA level. We went to the peewee tournament in Vernon, which still sticks out in my mind as one of my favorite minor hockey tournaments. So, it's a small city with a lot of really great people involved in the hockey community. So, like I said, I think it's still kicking around, but my dad and I, there's a good video online, but my dad and I built maybe one of the best outdoor hockey rinks, at least in Fairbanks, right on the side of my house. We'd lace up our skates right in my mom's foyer, which is probably why she never redid the hardwood there. And you'd hop out the front door. There was a nice little ice path right about 15 feet away. And we had boards, floodlights, fencing around, so you wouldn't lose pucks, and outdoor speakers. I mean, it was my house on the weeknights and weekends and sometimes before school. And that's all I did. Me and my sister Teal played hockey as well at Ohio State, same time as me. And gosh, we were, that was it. That's all we did. We got up, we skated, we'd skate after school. And, I knew pretty early on, I played a lot of different sports, mainly because my dad wanted me to be well-rounded. But by the time I was 8 or 9, I think I knew hockey was going to be it. And yeah, it was great though. I haven't been home in a few years, but I'd like to get back. Once you start having kids, traveling isn't as much of a vacation anymore. It's a little bit more complicated. So, but yeah, I'd love to get back to the bank soon. Both my mom, my dad, and my sister Teal live there. I pulled one of my sisters here south, but the other 3 are still kicking in Alaska.
Who'd you look up to growing up? I mean, we've heard of a lot of, Scott Gomez sort of comes to mind first as, an NHL from that area. Growing up, were there any sort of, influential people from that area, or were you able to sort of just, dive in as a hockey fan and sort of watch it as most of us do and play it the way most of us do?
Yeah, I think, early on, I wore 66. I love Mario Lemieux. I don't think I played anything like Mario Lemieux. And I was 66 or 68. I love the Penguins. I don't know why. My dad liked Detroit. I just, for some reason, picked the Penguins. And then I think when I got a little older and you start trying to identify yourself with a player, I really like Joe Sakic. I just love the way he put himself in scoring positions. He had a really good release and yeah, I just scoring goals, as with every hockey player, was my favorite thing to do. And I love the way he scored goals. Like, he was just in the quiet areas, could rip the puck. So that was a guy I really, would watch closely and followed, I guess, more or less. So I'd say he was a big influence on me. And, I think there's, like I said, there's a lot of great hockey minds that were involved that are still involved in the youth program. There's a guy, Roger McKinnon was my coach from Pee Wee's on, who, to me, I think that Pee Wee level is kind of when not a make or break, but that's when kids can really make a big jump. So he was a huge influence on me. And then a guy named Rob Profit, who's still the general manager of my first junior program, the Ice Dogs. He was a guy that, he was the man that ran hockey, more or less, or one of the guys that ran hockey. And he was my first junior coach, tough as nails. It's a different era today. And I know that big time because I coached last year. But one thing I remember about Prof is, he'd give it to guys in practice, and it was a little more old school hockey, and, which I kind of miss a little of that in today's game. But he coached me my first year junior at 15 and taught me some of the hard lessons I probably needed to learn at that time before making my way out to the USHL.
Yeah, and how does that process work? I mean, you at least, going back and doing the research that I do, you're with the Fairbanks Ice Dogs, but then it looks like the year after you started, they jumped into the NAHL, and then you made the progression up to the USHL in Cedar Rapids. How does that all sort of come together for you? Is it something that was just because you happen to be a local, that it was just an easy transition for you, and then you started to elevate yourself because you got into a ton of games? You got 52 games in the NAHL. Was that just sort of the progression that you expected to see?
So the progression there as a freshman, at that time, high school, your travel team would take a big break for high school hockey. And, high school hockey, and I don't know what it's like today, but at that time it wasn't very strong, as is, in a lot of places besides Minnesota and a couple others. So I made the decision my grade 9 year to just to be a practice player, essentially, with the Ice Dogs. So I rearranged my high school schedule. I took some online courses, and I would practice with the junior team basically every morning that whole season. And then at the end of the weekend, Prof threw me a couple games, as a weight, I was a young guy there. So I got to play a game, I believe, at the end of the season. I ended up scoring, which I'll never forget that goal, because it was at home with, everybody and every one of my friends there watching. So that was a cool moment. But then the next year, I mean, as a sophomore, it was full blown. I, went to training camp, made the team, and played on the team for a full season. And yeah, I think, it was as a grade 10, that was the highest level I could play at home. And, playing for the Ice Dogs was a goal of mine, from way earlier on. Those are games that I went to on the weekends with the boys, and, watching the junior team play. And, so that was a really, really cool year for me to have the opportunity to play juniors at home. I said that exact thing, recruiting players last year. I said, boys, playing juniors at home is special. When you can look around and know a lot of people in the stands, and it's just a different feeling when mom and dad get to be there every night. So that was a really great year. And then, I think naturally, I ended up getting drafted in the pre-draft from Cedar Rapids. Me and Justin Abdicator and Alex Stalock, two decent players. So think back to that now, but yeah, I think it was just a good opportunity. USHL, at that time too, was the highest, the best junior league, and we felt it'd be a good opportunity for me to go in and give it a run there. My team was so stacked at Cedar Rapids, like it was. I went into an absolutely loaded team. I think that year actually was one of the toughest years for me. I think mentally and just as from a development standpoint, to go in at 16 to the USHL and, be in and out on the fourth line playing limited minutes. I think sometimes that can be really tough confidence wise. And it was still a great year. I'm sure I learned a lot. It's hard to think back that far, but we had, like I said, Abdicator, Stalock, Alec Martinez, a bunch of guys that, regulars in the NHL, Teddy Purcell. So it was a really good year, but I would say it was definitely one of my hardest years, just because, it was, it wasn't my most productive year. And I was my first year away from home. It was just kind of everything wrapped into one, and Cedar Rapids, Iowa was nothing like Alaska. I'll tell you that for sure. Cornfields, for mountains, it was definitely different. So great experience there, but I definitely wanted to change up after that year. I wanted to get a little closer to home.
And on that timeline, 05-06, you get your first season with the Vipers. I mean, you sort of said you played the Pee Wee tournament probably years before. Did that have any bearing on you making the decision there, or what was the process like for you to go from the USHL? Who recruited you? And I guess that Pee Wee tournament. I mean, you had an experience in the town before. How much of an impact did that play?
My dad must have met. The global showcase was the first move. I knew I was like, we had some family advisor, trusted friends said, hey, maybe the BCHL would be a good fit for Hunter. I was played with speed, loved the offensive part of the game, and I think the BCHL's always been known for that. So I went out to global showcase right after the season, like right after we won in Cedar Rapids. I think it was almost like a day or two after we won, and yeah, I mean, it was definitely a factor, like being familiar with Vernon. But anyway, went to Global Showcase, had a blast, got to talk to a lot of different teams, which, it was just exciting for me, got a lot of interest, and I ended up narrowing it down to Penticton, Chilliwack, and Vernon. And I went on a visit to all three. I think I went to Penticton first. Obviously, Penticton's a beautiful area. Great hockey culture. They've been around. Did Chilliwack. They had their new barn. They just built that new rink, which was so impressive. And we did Vernon last. And at that time, Troy Mick was the one that talked to me at Global Showcase. And we rolled into Vernon, which was familiar to me because we'd been there as a Pee Wee. And I had nothing but great memories as a Pee Wee. It was one of my best tournaments. I got tournament MVP, so it was a highlight for me in my youth career. I remember that the poutine fries at the snack shop was like out of this world. We went to it was just a great all around trip. But I hadn't seen, and that was, the Pee Wee tournament. We were in the old barn there in Vernon, which had so much history. I remember while we were there, I think we got to do a tour of Vernon's locker room, and it was either the coach or one of their scouts handed me like an old school, videotape highlight reel of the junior program. And I thought, oh, it'd be cool to play here, so full circle. I walked into the new Vernon arena there. And, as you enter in from those top doors and you're looking down over the blue and the yellow, and it's just, I don't know, something about that rink. I just had a feeling from that split moment I walked in. I remember my dad saying, what do you think after all three visits? I said, Dad, something about Vernon. I just got a great feeling about it. That's where I want to play. And honestly, we didn't go back and forth at all. Like, it was Vernon. I like Troy. I believe in him to take me to the next level. And that's the way the whole thing went.
And a good year too. I mean, you couldn't necessarily be upset about the decision. I mean, in 05-06, you're just under a point a game guy. The team itself in 05-06 was really good as well. 36 wins. That still puts you in third. So there's lots of good teams in there. You go through, you beat Prince George, you end up losing to Salmon Arm. I mean, what was that? Did you sort of find yourself getting ingrained in the BCHL? I mean, the rivalry, specifically that Salmon Arm one, it stood the test of time for proximity reasons and so many other reasons. I mean, what was that whole first year like for you? Was it what you were hoping for in terms of being able to express yourself in the offensive zone while, honing on other skills in front of a fan base that we all know is very passionate.
Yeah, no, it was incredible. That first year, I mean, I think for me, to me, it stands out as the year that brought life back into my career, and that I remember talking with Troy, and, I think he believed in my offensive abilities and maybe grew my confidence in my own offensive abilities. And I think that's why I had so much success that year. I remember that year being a time that I scored a lot of overtime goals and a lot of timely goals. And, I think just being back in hockey country, when you're in Vernon and you're shopping at the grocery store, people are talking about the weekend behind you, you know what I mean? And people are, it's just one of those places where hockey's everything. And I think it just reminded me on that aspect. And just, BC, the BC area is so gorgeous, and it reminds me of Alaska from a physical standpoint as well. So it was an incredible year. I had great billets. We had a great group of guys. I think the BCHL was definitely an adjustment. It was a faster game. I think more offensively driven. It was a more physical game. There were some meaty guys in the BCHL at that time. So I think it was an adjustment for me from the physical level. I think I had to learn to play a little more of that chippy, get your nose dirty hockey, which is probably, was something that was needed in my game. And yeah, honestly, it was, we would have liked to have gone farther that year. I remember losing to Salmon Arm, and, that was our rivalry at that time. And those games were always, down to the bone, and guys were giving it, a lot of stuff behind the whistles. And, those are intense games always. So you never want to drop any of those guys. But overall, just a great experience that first year. It was no question in my mind that, I ended up coming back, obviously, and we're going to get to that. But no, there was no question whether I was going to play anywhere else besides Vernon as far as juniors goes.
And what's interesting about that too, Chris Crowell said that when he got into the league, Salmon Arm was the big rivalry, and you were sort of right there and in and around that timeline. A few years later, the rivalry would switch to Penticton. But I mean, my goodness, I've seen in a smaller sample size some absolute tilts between Vernon and Salmon Arm, and it's a blast to watch. The year after, 06-07, I'd love you to walk us through everything. I mean, again, from a fan's perspective, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you were there putting up more than a point a game, and then you're gone. First of all, University of North Dakota, that's a heck of a school and a heck of a program. But sort of walk us through what went down, some of the decisions that you were forced to make, and I imagine some pretty difficult ones to leave your group while you're, putting up the points and the team's winning like they were.
Yeah, I think obviously North Dakota, I mean, even at that time, they were in the Frozen Four. I don't know how many times in the past 4 years before I got there. Great program. Had an amazing visit. You walk into the Ralph Eggleston rink, and I mean, any player, NHL down to wherever, is going to be blown away. I mean, it's marble floors and leather seats. I mean, it's just an incredible place. I think physically I was definitely ready to go. I always, I like the off ice component. I think I was, as far as my physical shape, I was ready to play at the college level. And, I'd had a good year in the BCHL. I didn't have a great year. I had a good year. And I think I went in as a true freshman to Nodak. That was a team that had Oshie, Taves, Ryan Duncan, maybe the best college hockey line at that time. We were a really young team. I went in, I think by about Christmas time, I'd only played 4 games. And of the 4 games, it was, 3 to 5 shifts. And I think, more or less my understanding going in was that, they felt I was the guy to, come in and play a lot as a freshman. That's kind of what I was, sold on a little bit on my visit. And don't get me wrong, I know exactly how this goes, and you got to go in, you got to earn it, and maybe my performance wasn't what they had expected, but more or less it was a really rough first half, and I realized college is about, you got 4 years to get yourself to that point where you can hopefully earn yourself a pro contract, and it may not happen in the first 6 months, but it was a really young team. Like we only had one senior at that time. And I just remember, having conversations with my parents, obviously, and I wasn't happy. I wasn't playing at all. And the real problem was I wasn't sure whether that situation was going to change much in the year or the year after, because we didn't have many seniors, and it's all about the opportunities of who leaves, who comes in. So I don't know. I just, again, back to a gut feeling. I didn't feel like it was going to be a good fit for me. And I certainly wasn't sure if it was going to be a good fit long-term. And I remember calling Troy and kind of expressing how I was feeling about the situation there. And, he opened up the doors to come back to Vernon. And of course I was excited about that, obviously. But I think it just was, it wasn't going great for me. And I made this decision, and it was a hard decision, obviously leaving a school of that caliber. And I made the decision to leave at Christmas time. And I think I left on good terms. I was really honest with them. I said, look, guys, it's just, I'm not having any fun here. I've had a year like this before, and I'm not sure this is going to be a great fit for me. And we parted ways, and I packed my bags and headed back to the BCHL.
Is there any concern at that time that, you got your scholarship, you're at North Dakota, that if you sort of step away from that, everybody's able to look at things from the outside. They don't necessarily know what's going on the inside, but, all they see is Hunter Bishop leaves college, comes back, has a heck of a rest of the season with the Vipers. But in the back of your mind as a young guy, were you concerned at all that, you wouldn't be able to make the jump back to college when the junior career was over? Or were you that confident in the process that led to you going back to Vernon that it wasn't going to be a big deal and you were going to play yourself back into a scholarship of some kind?
Yeah, I don't. I think I was confident. I think for me, I knew what I was capable of. I think ultimately I realized that I'd gone too early, and that was a conversation, that I had with Bernie Pym, who was another great. I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and he was a big part of my development in Vernon. But him and I went back and forth, and he expressly said, "Look, I think you're not ready yet." And I think looking back, and it's always hindsight's always 20/20, but I wasn't ready to make that jump yet. Like I said, I had a good year in the BCHL, but I didn't have a great year. And I think you need to have a great year before you make that step into a top 4 college hockey team. And I think I realized that while I was at Nodak, and that was a big factor. And I think a lot of people thought I was nuts, including my mom and dad. They weren't exactly in support of my decision, but they were going to support me either way. But I think when we were talking down to it, I think they kind of thought I was nuts. But I'd say I was confident in my decision. I wanted to go back to Vernon. I wanted to prove myself further in that league. I wanted to have a great season so that when I went into college, I was ready to be a contributor instantly. And that was the goal I went back with.
And I mean, hard to argue with the decision that was made. I mean, again, hindsight's being 20/20, but you come in and you're a point a game guy when you get back. 22 points, 24 games. The team finishes second in the division, a really good number. And then you start to roll through the playoffs. And probably the year before, you felt like it was cut short. You felt like the group probably had more in it. And going through this, you knock out West Kelowna in 6 games. You knock off Trail in 5 games. Take care of the V's to win the division in 5 games. I mean, what do you remember about the divisional postseason before we chat about the league final? But I mean, that had to be exactly what you were hoping for. And sort of share your experiences with the Vipers and the V's. Again, that's the recent rivalry that everybody loves. There's been plenty of Game 7s that I've witnessed in the last 8 years. I imagine it was more the same when you guys were making the run through the interior.
Yeah, when I went back, the players, I ended up playing alongside Mike Ulrich, and to this day, he's one of the best centermen I played with. He had that poise in the middle that he could draw guys in and just distribute left and right. And, I was on his backhand. He was just one of those guys that, we instantly had chemistry, and we had a really well-balanced team that year. We had heavy hitters, we had guys that could score. So I think we were definitely a playoff built team at that point, and I think everybody just came in with so much confidence. But when you ask about the Penticton Vs, it's my first ever preseason game with the Vipers was against Penticton, and I'm pretty sure by the end of the game there was only 3 guys on each bench left, other than the 5 on the ice. Because if you fought preseason, you get kicked out, and then I think I ended up fighting Brian Lebler. I ended up fighting Lebler at the very end of the game. It was an absolute gong show. That was my first ever game in the BCHL, and I remember thinking in my mind, oh, what did I get myself into? This league's out of control. Obviously, it's not all like that, but I think that's just what's great about the BCHL. It still has that old time hockey feel. Guys learn that gritty part of the game that you need to make it at the next level. So yeah, I mean the Salmon Arm series were always nasty, but I mean Penticton was the team that you really wanted to give it to and hammer on. So those games, I mean, it was every series was intense, but the series with Penticton, and you're going to war when you go to play against those guys, and at least I'm glad to hear it's still that way now.
You guys were able to make it to the league final against Nanaimo. Obviously, that didn't work out in your favor, but talking with some of the guys, it's the appearances in league finals that weren't successful that helped prep them for the eventual run that the team would go on a couple of years later. What do you remember about the league final, the intensity, the quality of play from the opposition? Obviously, 6-game loss in the league final, but again, as a 19-year-old at the time, that had to be a pretty important notch on the experience belt, right, when you're moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'd been on, I was lucky enough to have been on, we'd won in Cedar Rapids. So I'd gotten kind of the feeling of what the ride's like to the end there. And, I think back to that Nanaimo series, and, it 100% could have gone either way. I think obviously they had a great team. But I had, I was shocked that we weren't the ones that come out of that series. I think it was just, sometimes in playoffs, that's the way it goes. But I mean, they played outstanding that entire way. I mean, I wouldn't take anything away from Nanaimo, but I definitely think we were built, to continue through that series. But what do I remember the most? I remember, gosh, I'd have to really rack my brain here, but I just remember those games, like the fatigue that sets in when you get to that point. I think from a mental standpoint, I'll never forget, but it's the day after, because you don't really notice during a series, but when you're finally done and you finally, relax, that's when everything really hurts. But when you're going, it's just you go into that pilot mode, and you can't really think about how tired you are. But I just remember that series being, especially the games on the road and the travel, I just remember being really taxing on the body. But, I remember our games at home, just, the fans and everybody getting involved. We had good turnout with fans. And those games are the most fun when everything's on the line and you got everybody there watching, and the barn's going nuts. The guys are drumming on the drums. And, I think for me, I have nothing but great memories of that series. I remember it being tough, but I just remember the games being intense and just that, that atmosphere in your home rink. I mean, to me, those are the greatest memories I have of playing, for sure.
You go into your 20-year-old year, and this is the year everybody talks about. I mean, my goodness, 57 goals in the regular season. So there's some names. I did some research. I obviously wasn't around for this, but I asked a local a question. Who's come close to that? Because that number is extremely impressive. Jeff Cheeseman was pretty close. Lanny Garrett came close as well, but you put 57 in 60 games. How active did you? How did you think about that? Did you at all think about that? Were you able to process that you were at one point on pace for 60 and 60? Was that a goal of yours? How much did you put into those numbers? The team success was obviously what it was, but you get a shot at a number like that. How much did that weigh on you? How much did you think about it?
Well, I don't think I was a guy that thought too much. It wasn't like I went into the season was like, I'm going to score 60 goals. That was never, I hoped I was never that guy. And I pride myself on, it was always team first. But, it's funny because I hope he watches this, but Chris Crowell, every time I talk to that guy, he always reminds me 57 and 60, not 60 and 60, 57 and 60. He always likes to bust my balls about that, but Crowler and I are great buddies, so it's all in good fun. But that year was, I did a great interview with Brianna Nor, am I saying that right? And she said, what do you attribute to that success? I said two things. One's name was Connor, one's name was Kellen. Those two came in, and they were young at that point. They were 16, turning 17. They were children, and they were small for 16, 17, right? And they were just a couple of young rooks, just happy to be in the BCHL. Great dudes. I still talk to them here and there. But I remember in training camp, and I told the same story to Brianna. I said, I said, guys, look, I won't go below the top of the circles all season. I'm telling you right now. You guys go down there, do your thing, and I'll be waiting in the weeds, and you just find a way to hit me, and we're going to have a great year. And obviously I was kidding, and I kind of wasn't kidding with them. But those two are just magicians. They complement each other so well. They're like Sedin twins. They know where each other are at without even looking. And we instantly had chemistry. Like those guys were able to find me. It was almost like they had that sixth sense to just know where I was going to be at. And it was such a great year, having that much success offensively. We had a blast, but we had a great group that year too. And I think as a 20-year-old, as with everybody, like I wanted to win a championship. That was my goal. I wanted to leave with some hardware out of Vernon. And although we didn't get that that year, hopefully, just hearing about the success those guys had for the years after me, I couldn't have been happier and more proud to just be a part of the Vipers family to see those guys go on and win championships like that. And Chris Crowell was an incredible leader with me, and obviously I'm sure he was a huge part in their success in those following years. But just an awesome year. Mark Ferner was a great coach for me. He was patient, hard when he needed to be, but he was a player's coach. A guy that I tried to emulate my coaching style on last season. So, overall it was just it was an incredible year. The fans, we had just a great. I remember there was a group of Australians that were up at Silver Star that whole year, and for whatever reason they got involved. Like they were at every one of our home games, and these guys were just going nuts. And that's one thing that really stands out to me, and it's still a great memory for me today. But these guys would just be going wild, and in the games where I'd really have lighted up and have good ones, they'd be chanting guys' names, chanting my name. It just, I think for a young player, even as a 20, it's just those are great memories to look back on. And gosh, it still stings to not have won a championship in Vernon, but just an incredible amount of respect for the Viper family and for Ryan Duncan, for Dunks. He's just I know he passed here a short while ago, but hands down the most incredible owner of a hockey organization that I can think of. As a player, you instantly felt like you were a part of it. It wasn't the business side, and I know there is one, but you didn't feel it with Dunk. Like you were a part of the family. And he was just one of those guys that he was there for the players, and he did everything he could to make you feel like you're at home and make sure guys are comfortable. So, it was incredible last year. And although we didn't win a championship, obviously it was a great personal year for me, and it gave me that confidence I needed to go in to that next step at Ohio State.
Funny you mentioned the Jones twins. We did a show just like this with both of them. I'd actually encourage you, when you get a free time, you got to clear about an hour and a half in your schedule, though. They both chat quite a bit.
Those two like to talk.
Well, and I think they shared that same story about the I'm not going below the hash marks or the dots story. So I feel like we've heard that one before. Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did. It's an amazing story. A 20-year-old playing with a couple of 16-year-olds, and you put up.
Have you had and I call them. Did you get? Have you had Crowell on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll have to go back in the archives and watch.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that one. I'm sure he's got. I don't know if he told the story about me, but if he did, I know exactly which one it is. Sorry, I called him Ryan Duncan because I'm thinking back to North Dakota. Duncan Ray, obviously.
That's right.
I want to make sure I correct that.
Yes.
That was. Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch Chris Krause, make sure he didn't over exaggerate anything. I know he likes to tell stories.
There you go. At the end of the day, it's a 7-game loss to the Penticton Vs. When it's sort of all said and done, you kind of knew that you were off to the next level. But did you get a chance to reflect when it was over? I know it was a long time ago, and things happen so quick. Season's over. Maybe you get an after party. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're gone. Now you're going home. Did you get a chance to reflect on that at all? Obviously, heartbreaking loss to Penticton at the time. Your junior career is over. Sky's the limit, though, on what you could accomplish. Did you get a chance to sort of reflect on the years in Vernon and how much that sort of helped, project you where you ended up being?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's years where, the season ends and I'm ready to start making plans to get home or, whatever. But, I think when I look back to my time in Vernon, I was never in a rush to get out of there. I think we always had great groups of people, not just players, but we had, Vernon, I felt like always recruited good humans and good teammates. And we always had tremendous teams while I was there. So I think we always, I always, would spend some time and hang out with the boys. And I had amazing billets while I was there. And, so I would always spend some time. But yeah, I think after that last year, obviously, knowing that I wasn't going to get to come back and all the great experience I had, it was a sad moment for me leaving Vernon for the final time. And I've been back since, which has been nice. And I'd love to come back again. But yeah, I think, just looking back at the 3 years and what it did for me in my career, yeah, it definitely had a huge impact. And it's something, that I talked about while I was a pro, while I talked about at college. And, I still talk about to this day. And when players ask me questions and want input on different leagues and different teams, and I tell them all the same thing, guys. It's really easy. You go to the BCHL, you play for the Vernon Vipers, best junior hockey team in the world. And that's my true opinion.
The 2 years that you spent, of course, and not everybody knows this. I actually just realized this the other day. You go to college now, you're a full-time student. Now your NCAA clock is ticking. So you're only able to play 2 more years of college hockey. You go to Ohio State University. At that time, did you still have ambitions to be a professional hockey player?
Yeah, 100%. I got to go in. So when I left North Dakota, I had to finish a 2-year associate's degree. And when I went into Ohio State, I came in as a sophomore. So I would have been able to play 3 seasons at Ohio State. But yeah, 100%. My goal was to sign a pro contract. And to be honest, that was always my goal. I don't know. Even when I was younger, I think when I started to get letters from colleges, it was obviously exciting, but to me, college was never my goal. It was, the NHL was always my goal. And that was always really clear from an early age. So I think when I went into Ohio State, I picked it for a couple different reasons. But I think the main one was I thought it would give me a great opportunity to get myself to the next level.
Let's talk a little bit about, the professional career. We've talked to a lot of guys and it's a grind. It's a different beast altogether. You finish university, you're able to do something not many people do, and that's even get a crack at the AHL, the American Hockey League. We'll talk specifically about 09-10. You get your first game in the AHL. What sort of goes through your mind when you sort of sign your professional contract and you get your first game with the Bulldogs?
Yeah, so I had an offer after my first year at Ohio State. I decided to stay for a second year, and I'm sure that was a byproduct of previous decisions I'd made in my early career with, going to the USHL. I felt maybe too early, NODAC too early. I decided to wait that next year at Ohio State for that exact reason. I said, I want to go in, I want to have a great season. I want to make sure that I'm ready to make that jump. When I signed with Montreal, that moment for me was, that was everything. That was, not everything, but I was that much closer. That was that next step. And my wife, Tara, she's from Waverly, Ohio. And I remember the reception at her house was really bad. We were just dating at the time. So her brother drove me down to like the end of the street so I could get on the horn with my agent. And he was letting me know, like, hey, deal's coming through. You're going to get the contract's coming in. Make sure you fax it back to me. So, yeah, I mean, that moment of signing an NHL deal and, with a team I felt like I was going to get a good opportunity with. I mean, that was just, a dream come true for me. Very exciting. Getting that first taste. I mean, it was right away, hey, we need you to report to Hamilton. And it's all just kind of, it was a whirlwind. You go from college, eating ramen noodles, quesadillas, just making it. And then all of a sudden, I'm flying into, Buffalo. They send a car for you. They drive you across the border. I mean, it was right into the fire. And, they had Pacioretty was down at that time. Subban was down at that time. I mean, there were some incredible players. Hamilton was stacked that year as well. I mean, honestly, I thought we should have won the whole thing that season. But just an incredible experience getting to play for Guy Boucher. He was only there for that short while. And, everybody's, you can watch videos on YouTube, you can read articles, but his system, it was so black and white and it was so different from anything I'd ever done. But I loved it. I mean, it was like, you're here, you swing here, you angle this way, you pinch, and everything was about just quick offense, turn and go, move that puck north, send pucks to the paint. Like his system really fit me. I loved it. And I thought I had a really good, in those 9 games, I thought I had a really good, performance, at least, from what I thought. For a first taste of pro hockey in the AHL, it was amazing. And we had some incredible veteran leaders on that team. And I think it was just a really good kind of intro for me, to the pro game.
And then it's sort of, I mean, again, I've just doing some research. You kind of bounce around a little bit. You end up in the ECHL with Wheeling, back to Hamilton, 11-12, no games whatsoever. I imagine that's an injury of some kind without knowing too much. And then, I mean, from there, you bounce around a little bit in South Carolina and then a couple of other AHL franchises. How difficult was it to not necessarily have, the stationary home? You're bouncing around a little bit. It can't be an easy thing to do. To be a professional athlete, you've got maybe a girlfriend or whatever at the time, and you're pretty much living out of a suitcase. Walk us through some of the challenges that were a part of that.
Yeah, the first 2 years were really, really rough. I think about a month and 2 months maybe before my first training camp in Montreal, I ended up getting a hernia and got surgery right away. So when I got to Montreal for main camp for my my first year or my first contracted year, essentially, I had just been cleared for ice and starting to get back into skating. And I think it was either day 1 or day 2 of rookie camp. We were skating twice a day, and to be honest, I wasn't in great shape. I hadn't been skating, I hadn't been working out, anything. I ended up taking a heavy hit and got a concussion, and that's how my training camp started. I was out for, I think, and that was a pretty bad concussion. Like I was out, I think, almost 2.5 months, something like that. It was a long time. It was a long road. I got healthy. They sent me down to Wheeling, which is every guy's dream on an NHL contract. You get sent down to the coast. But it was good. I went down there, I played a ton and kind of got the feel back. came back up to the American League and, was kind of figuring out the program that whole year. I was in, fourth line in and out, playing limited minutes. And, I think it was still a good year, but it definitely wasn't a crazy offensive year and not a very productive year for me. And, it was a tough first year. I think I had another small injury, later in the season. And, to me, it was crazy. I think, I always trained on my own. I did a Peter Twist program through juniors, and I obviously had success with it. I did the same. But I think at a certain point, the pro game, the level of physicality, the guys that you're playing against, it's a whole different level. And I think guys that, you really have to invest in somebody that really knows what they're doing and can really teach those, injury prevention. I paid a lot more attention to it later in my career than I did earlier in my career. And I think if I could go back, I would have worked with somebody specifically that summer that had been doing it longer than I did. Because that first year, it really hurt me. And then, so the next summer, I trained the whole summer in Vancouver with a great trainer. He was awesome. But I went in to main camp, and in my first exhibition game, I hit Zach Cassian on the wall, fell awkwardly. And I mean, if you watch the video, you would think nothing happened. Shoulder popped out, needed labrum surgery, and I missed the entire season. And that's my 2-year window. That was it. It was over before I knew it. I missed the whole year, got no games in. The next year was a lockout, which was a tough year for everybody. Contracts weren't, it was a tough year, especially for guys that are kind of on the cusp or bubble like I was. So I had the opportunity to take a 2-way AHL East Coast deal with Hamilton. And I decided I didn't want to do that. And I just kind of waited. Obviously, there was a lockout. And I ended up, my assistant coach from Ohio State was coaching here in Charleston, South Carolina. And when I met my wife, she said, Charleston's my favorite city in the United States. I'd never even heard of it. So when he was coaching in Charleston, I reached out. I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'd like to come down there. And it ended up working out. And, long and short, I said, if I'm gonna play in the East Coast, which the East Coast is a grind, I want to go somewhere where I'm gonna enjoy my time off the ice. And that's a huge that's a huge part of it. If you're happy off the ice, and it affects your performance on the ice. And what a great experience! Again, gut feeling. Came down here, had a great year, had so much fun. And then when the lockout ended, I had a couple call ups and finally ended up in Manchester, New Hampshire. But obviously, we liked it so much, we ended up buying a place here that next summer and are calling it home.
You have your last, at least North American professional stint with Manchester in 13-14. And then, as sometimes is the case, the opportunities in Europe present themselves. I couldn't pretend to know how to pronounce half of these, so I'm not even going to try. It looks like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Slovakia first? Is that the Slovenia? Oh, okay, well, I was half right. And then Switzerland, and then Germany. Do I have that in the right order?
No, so it went Slovenia, Germany, and then Austria.
Okay. How did I know nothing really. How does that opportunity present itself? I mean, it's got to be a difficult thing to go, where you're comfortable. You're an Alaska guy, and now you're going, to Europe to try give a few more years of your career. How did you enjoy those years across the ocean?
Yeah, so I think so in 2012, the year before, I guess 11-12, the year that I had labrum surgery, my wife and I took a trip over to Europe right after the season. We did Italy, Spain, Greece, a couple other ones. We did a great trip, and we loved it. And my first year away from home in Cedar Rapids, I think that was a tough year for me. But as far as travel, and I've always loved to travel. I love going to new places, seeing new things. So that's always been a big thing. My wife feels the same way. So we had a great trip, played 2 more years in the American League. after that second year in the American League, and I think a lot of guys would share, if you're not going to play in the NHL, you can make more money in Europe. And maybe that's changed today, but at least at that time. I was ready to, I kind of felt like I had seen that my window to get back to the NHL had kind of closed. And there's certainly exceptions, guys that, can really wait it out and maybe eventually get their shot. But I was ready to make some more money in my career and maybe see some new places. So we looked into the opportunities overseas, and we ended up in Ljubljana, Slovenia. I mean, when my agent called me and said Ljubljana is offering you a contract, I had to get on Google Maps and go, where the hell is this place? But let me tell you, that city, I mean, that whole season, that was one of the greatest experiences, not only in my hockey career, but just in my entire life. Just an unbelievable country. That city is such a hidden gem in Europe. I mean, it's just storybook, river through the downtown, nothing but, it was unbelievable. And the hockey was great. Everybody learns English from like kindergarten on. So there was hardly any difficulty there. The Slovenian guys were great teammates. That was just an awesome year. Now, of course, they stopped paying us in January. So the end of the season got a little bit dicey, but as far as hockey goes and experience, that was an incredible season. I mean, Ljubljana, you're 35, you're within an hour, you can be in Austria, Italy, or Croatia, so in training camp, we're, on a day off, pick your spot. I mean, I'm going spearfishing in Croatia with teammates, or, we're driving over to Venice, Italy. Like, it was incredible.
It sounds amazing. And sometimes I guess you forget that there are, these leagues and these opportunities. You spend 1 year there, and then, you kind of wrap up your European tour 4 years later. I mean, did it leave that much of an impact on you that, you were happy to go back for a couple of more years to just have that experience?
Oh yeah, and I knew, in Europe with the bigger rinks, and to be honest, it really fit my style. It's a speed game over there. It's not quite as physical, so guys can have longer careers. But yeah, we hopped over to Germany the next year. I had an offer in the Dell, and that's from the Austrian league, that's a step up. Guys can make more money there. I ended up, Rick Aduno was my coach there. I ended up getting fired on my birthday out of training camp. So that was that was an odd time in my career. I got fired from the team, and we waited for a buyout negotiation, I think, until mid-November. So I was just hanging out in Germany. I was actually practicing. They essentially had to keep paying me per my contract unless I decided to go play somewhere else. So, while we waited for another opportunity somewhere, I was practicing with like a high school German team, and, we were just living in Germany at that point. That was my wife and I laugh now when we look at it. We made the best of it. We'd go to the gym in the mornings, and, I'd practice in the evenings 2 days a week with the high school team. So, it was some great memories out of there. But obviously from the hockey standpoint, threw up some big question marks, where's my career headed? What's next? And then the opportunity in Innsbruck came up, and, Innsbruck for me, as far as my pro career, that was the pinnacle. I had that city, that team, that rink, Innsbruck, it's tucked in that western corner of Austria. And, again, you're within an hour, you can be in Switzerland, Germany, or Italy, so you're in a really cool area. The city sits right along the Alps, and state of the, like, sick rink, great rink. Like, it kind of sits a little bit, it sits low, but on one side it's like all window pane glass. And when they have the window pane glass open, you see nothing but like mountains, so it was just a really cool spot. I ended up playing, they were my Connor and Kellen Jones equivalents, the guy named Tyler Spurgeon and John Lammers. we played together pretty much all 3 years and just had that chemistry, had offensive success. We had great seasons. So for me, as far as my pro career goes, that was that was a highlight. My wife and I got to travel a ton. We had my daughter Brody, the summer and got to have her over there while she was really young. And yeah, so it's some great experiences there in Austria.
When it was finally time to, I'll guess not all that long ago, 18-19 was your last year of professional hockey. Did you kind of know that you were ready to hang it up and pursue some other things? Is there, I guess it's different for everybody, but I imagine there's a point where you go, is it worth doing? Am I ready? At a young age, I imagine, I have you down at like 30 at the time. You're probably ready to, do other things, lots of life left and a degree from university. Did you kind of know that it was time to hang up the skates, at least in terms of being a professional player? And what did you have in mind after?
Yeah, I think it got to a point we were trying for our second kid. And, I think the moment you start, kids are involved, it definitely, it's a little bit different. There's, some different justifications and, logistics that need to be worked out, moving all the way over there and being away from family and all those other things. So, I was definitely, I knew the end was coming. My time had ran up in Innsbruck. We went into that last year. I ended up signing a contract in Belfast, another great city and great hockey community. But I knew that it was either going to be my last year or second to last year. I didn't know yet. And, as the season rolled on, the opportunity came up with the junior team here. And I think it was just, for me, it was, I was thinking I might be ready. And when everything kind of lined up to coach and coach here in Charleston, I knew it was the right time to move away. And, my wife's got a great job and a career. And, obviously I knew I needed to start working on, phase two of life and start working on whatever I'm going to get involved in here at home. So yeah, it was, it was bittersweet. I think, the kid in me, I would have loved to have played till I was 40 or until somebody told me I was too old. But, the adult in me and being a dad and, wanting to make sure my girls have, get every opportunity I got, I knew it was time to step away and start building roots here at home.
You spend a year as a coach. Obviously, I think every player sort of has it in their mind when it's over. I could probably coach. It can't be that difficult. The standard things, you see it from a player perspective. How different was it to get your because from what I understand, it was just the only year that you did the coaching. How different was it when it came down to the change in roles for you?
Yeah, it was wildly different than what I thought it'd be. Obviously some great moments. I'd been doing the Hunter Bishop hockey camps for, I think, 5 or 6 years before that. So the group of local kids that were going to play for the junior team, I'd been working with these guys for years already. So I think for me, that was special, being able to, create a junior atmosphere and experience for these guys and taking my experiences and hopefully just creating a really good overall, setup for these guys to get their first taste. I think that part was great. And, I wanted to make it enjoyable. I wanted to make sure that, I did everything I could to help prepare these guys for the next level, whatever that may be. But, being a coach is definitely, it's different stresses and, you're sitting there thinking about, it's funny. I laugh about it now, but, you just show up to practice and whatever's up on the board or, power play or line combinations, deep pairings. I think that it's definitely a lot. It's definitely different, but I was coach of 2 different clubs. The way the USBHL works, you have a premier and an elite team and, an A and a B team, pretty much. And, I was head coach of both and I was the general manager, of it. And I think it was just, it was a lot. And I think, dealing with the money part and the business side, it just, it definitely, it wasn't for me. And I just knew it wasn't going to be it wasn't going to be a good fit for me long term. As a coach, you gotta go where the opportunities are, and Charleston's home for us. So I'm never leaving. So we weren't going to move away to coach anywhere. So I think I just knew it wasn't going to be a long-term fit. And that's why I made the decision after the season to kind of step away and, do more of what I'm doing now, which is on the player development side.
And yeah, that's a perfect segue. It's like you laid it out for me. I wanted to ask you about the school. I mean, obviously on social media, it's a big deal. How do you sort of come up with the idea to do the hockey school, and how have you seen that in the sport and your hockey program sort of blossom in what many would call all the ignorance, mostly me, a non-hockey market?
Yeah. So I did. For me, going to hockey camps, and my dad had me in everything: the power skating, the skills camps, the shooting, defensive camps. I mean, I did them all when I was younger. And I always loved them. But one of the camps that really stuck out to me, at least in Alaska, was Turcotte Stick Handling School. And I know they operate in the Okanagan still. And, that camp to me was one of the innovators as far as skills camps or skills coaches goes. And I think, you can see it now. The game is really changing. It's so fast. Even a 6'4" defenseman can still toe drag to the middle and fire a puck. So it's becoming a more dynamic game, a faster game, a more skilled game. And me as a player, like I always loved it. Even in the summers, just with a group of junior college pro guys, I would come up with drills, pretty often. I just loved doing it. I loved doing it myself. I love putting it together for other guys and coming up with different combinations and giving goes and touches. So I think for me, it's just something that I was really passionate about. I ended up, I think maybe it was my senior year of doing the Turcotte Stick Handling School. They, I started working in them when I was about, I think 15 or 16. They still had me as an assistant instructor. And then one year when I think I was 17, he called me up and said, "Hey, I'm not coming. We want you to run the Alaska territories." Of course, at that time I was, scared shitless. I had no idea. I'm like, "What do you mean? You want me to hold a parent meeting?" It's like, but yeah, I ran the Alaska camps for a number of years, even through college. And while I was playing in Vernon, I ran Turcotte Stick Handling School. And then when we moved here to Charleston, I ran Turcotte Stick Handling School that first summer in 2012. And then the next year, I said, "Hey, this is going to be home for me. I want to kind of start my own thing." And that's when I started Hunter Bishop Hockey, HBH. And honestly, it's been incredible. I go to the rink and I know almost every kid in the youth program, which is so fun for me, especially when we're on the ice working and I know everybody. And I just, I think back and the impact and, I remember when pro guys or junior guys would come out to these camps or as a guest star. And, even if they said one thing to you in the whole hour, you remembered it and you'd go home and tell your mom and dad. And it can be a huge impact as a hockey player. It can create passion. It can be the reason that a kid comes back and plays the next year and maybe goes on to have a pro career. So for me, it's a special feeling. And I just really love doing it. I love working with the younger guys, and now that I'm retired and from the coaching and have a little more free time, I got to work with some pro guys and some junior guys this summer. And yeah, it's something that I love to do. I expanded, usually we run I run all day camps, where we're on the ice twice a day and, we do off ice and games and stuff and just really build the passion. And then this summer I did some specialized camps and, ones that are just focused on goal scoring. That was, I did that this summer. It was incredible. And I do an elite skills one. So, for me, I think it's becoming a norm in the game today, especially at the NHL level, the college level, junior level. A lot of these teams have skills coaches, and it's not just an overall skills. It's, they have a shooting coach. In LA, we had in Manchester, they'd bring in like a fighting coach, So it's, these specialized coaches is becoming more of a norm in the game. And I think it's important. I think, the coaches that aren't buying into it need to, because it's, it's the trend now, and guys are expected to be, have a, the level of skill in the NHL now is a lot higher than it used to be.
Well, it's really impressive to track on social media. I know that we do that through the Vipers Instagram account. Your logo looks super sharp, my man, too. Very
I appreciate it.
very nice merch. We sort of wrap these up, and this was great chatting with you. We typically wrap them up with a chance to sort of reminisce and say something to the Viper fans, anybody that, sort of had an impact on you. Obviously, a lot of Viper fans are going to they're going to consume this content. They'd love to hear back from you. And it sort of ties in nicely with what you said about sort of reigniting the passion that you had for the game that you may have lost due to a couple of different experiences, and the fun that you had as a player. You mentioned it's hard to think about having more fun than being a junior hockey player and doing it here in the North Okanagan. The floor is yours to sort of wrap up and say any thank yous to your time as a Viper.
Well, yeah, it would. I could go on forever, but ultimately, I think my time in Vernon for me is what really it really was a pivotal point for me in my hockey career. I learned not only just about learning the game and playing like a warrior and just having that grit and that heart and playing for something that's bigger than yourself. I think that's ultimately what Vernon taught me. They do things the right way, and it's that one heartbeat, that goal in mind of winning championships and putting the team before yourself. I think just the life lessons I learned in Vernon were some of the biggest. And Troy Mick obviously bringing me in to the Vernon family. Who knows where my career would have gone if I had chosen a different spot. I know that in my life God intended me to be in Vernon, and it was a great step for me. And ultimately, to me, I think that's what led me into my pro contract, and leading into that success in Ohio State. Bernie Pym took over that team mid-season when Troy was having a little bit of health issues. So he was obviously a huge part. Hollick, Ferner, and then ultimately Duncan Ray. Like I said, that he treated me not like a player. It was more like a kid, his own kid, and I think every guy that played for him would say the same thing. So I think, I can't say enough about the Vernon program. That I tell guys all the time, once money is involved, as a pro, the game's just different. It really is. It becomes a job, and, the expectations, the stresses, it is just different. Junior hockey to me is the purest fun. It's back to that childhood fun, just being with the boys and having those big wins and being in the locker room and guys dancing. And, the Vernon rink to me is still one of the most electric places, in the world. And I've played all over it, and it's not just, the overall look of that rink, because it's a beautiful arena, but it's the people inside it, the guys beating the drums, that always stands out to me. Just, the loudness, people waiting after the games to say hi, little kids waiting for autographs. It's just one of the greatest hockey hotbeds to me in juniors, as far as my opinion goes. And yeah, I think it's just those little moments where you're in a grocery store in Vernon and people were at the game on the weekend and maybe they recognize you or people are talking about it. I think just being a part of a community like that, it just really felt like home. And I think it'll always feel like home to me. But yeah, I just, nothing but love for the Vernon Vipers, the family there, my teammates, Corral. I'm going to have to call him. And I'm definitely going to watch his podcast because I know that he's a storyteller. But, the Jones twins, just so many great people. While I was there, I could go all day. I had unbelievable teammates that I played with. And, yeah, to me, when I look back on my career, there's a couple big highlights, and I'd say Vernon's right there at the top. It was some of the funnest times I had as a hockey player.
It was really nice to connect with you, meet you for the first time. We really appreciate the time. All the best to you and your family and your hockey program that you've got going on down there. And the next time you happen to be out vacationing in North Okanagan, make sure to look us up. Hunter, thank you so much for taking the time today. We really appreciate it.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.